My daughter-in-law pressed a wet sponge into my hand in front of 10 people and told me I'd been living rent-free long enough. My son watched from across the table and didn't say a word to stop her. That was Easter Sunday. By 2 o'clock Monday morning, I had packed everything that mattered into one rolling suitcase and slipped out the back door like a ghost. And on Monday morning, while they slept in the house I had been quietly paying for, I made a single phone call that turned their entire world upside down. I want to tell you the whole story. Stay with me until the end and drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. I love knowing how far these stories travel. Eugene died on a Thursday morning in March, 4 years ago. He was in the kitchen making his second cup of coffee, the way he always did, and then he was just gone. Massive heart attack, 68 years old. We had been married 41 years. I won't dwell on that grief. Anyone who has lost a spouse of 4 decades knows there are no words for it. Anyone who hasn't, I hope they never need to learn. Our son Kyle was 39 when his father died. He drove up from Columbus the morning of the funeral, and somewhere between the graveside service and the reception at our church, he pulled me aside and held both my hands. He said, "Mom, you shouldn't be alone in that house." He looked so much like Eugene when he said it, same jaw, same eyes, that I had to look away. I thought it was love talking. I thought my son was offering me shelter because he couldn't bear to picture me rattling around our empty house in Dayton by myself. I said I needed a few weeks to decide. He called every other day. His wife, Rachel, texted me photos of the guest room they were getting ready. She had painted it a soft blue and bought new curtains. She seemed to mean it. 2 months after the funeral, I packed what I could fit into my Subaru and drove 80 miles south. What I didn't understand, standing in that freshly painted room with my suitcases at my feet, was that things can begin one way and slowly become something else entirely, so gradually that by the time you notice, you're already deep in it. It started small. Rachel worked long hours in real estate, always hosting open houses or client dinners, so I offered to cook dinner a few nights a week. That was fine. I liked to cook. Eugene always said my chicken pot pie could make a grown man cry, and I have no reason to doubt him. But a few nights became every night, and every night became cleaning the kitchen afterward. Because Rachel was on her laptop and Kyle was watching television. Then it was doing the laundry, because Rachel mentioned once that the pile in the hallway was getting embarrassing. Then it was the bathrooms, the vacuuming, the grocery runs, the little garden Kyle had planted but never touched. By the end of the first year, I was running their household while they went about their lives, and I had somehow agreed to all of it without ever agreeing to any of it. I tried to say something once. It was a Sunday afternoon in February, about 18 months in. Rachel had given me a list of tasks to finish before her book club arrived at 6. Both bathrooms scrubbed, a charcuterie board arranged, lemon bars baked from scratch. I had been up since 7 working through it, and when I came into the kitchen to check on the oven, Kyle was standing at the counter scrolling his phone. I said very gently, I was hoping maybe I could join tonight, just sit with everyone for a little while. He didn't look up from his screen. Mom, Rachel's friends are kind of a specific group. It might feel a little awkward. I was wearing oven mitts. I stood there for a moment with nowhere to put my hands, and then I walked back to the kitchen, and I did not push it. That was my mistake, not pushing it. But when your child uses that tone, the one that makes you feel like a problem being managed rather than a person being considered, something in you goes quiet. You tell yourself they're busy. You tell yourself you're helping. You get very good at convincing yourself that things are fine. Rachel liked to host. Thanks. That was the thing about her. She cared enormously about what her colleagues thought of her life. She was good at her job, and she wanted people to see it. And the way she showed them was through her house and her table, and the food that appeared, as if by magic, every time guests came through the door. The magic was me. Easter Sunday this year, she had invited 10 people from her real estate office for brunch, her broker and his wife, 3 colleagues with their partners, and a newer agent she'd been mentoring. I had been in the kitchen since 6 in the morning. Glazed ham with a brown sugar and mustard crust, a potato gratin, deviled eggs with smoked paprika, a fruit salad, homemade biscuits, and a lemon bundt cake that alone took me 2 hours. I set the table with the linen napkins Rachel had gotten for Christmas, and polished the serving platters and put out the good crystal. By the time guests arrived at 11, I had been on my feet for 5 hours. I stayed in the kitchen, as I always did. That was my place during their parties, behind the door, out of frame. I plated things, refilled platters, kept the coffee hot. When I had to carry something to the table, the guests would give me that polite, slightly uncomfortable smile people give to someone who is clearly the help. About an hour into the meal, I heard a crash and Rachel's voice saying, "Oh, for God's sake." One of the guests had knocked over a full glass of red wine. It spread fast across Rachel's white tablecloth, the one she'd ordered from a boutique linen company in Atlanta. I was already turning toward the kitchen to get something to blot it when Rachel appeared in the doorway herself. She was holding the kitchen sponge, the one I used to wipe down the counters. It was damp and faintly grey, and I knew without touching it that it smelled like old dishwater. She walked across the dining room in front of all 10 of her guests and pressed that sponge into my palm. "Eloise," she said. Her voice was bright and social, the way it always was when there were people around. "You've been staying with us going on 4 years without contributing a thing toward this household. The least you can do when we have company is take care of something like this before it sets permanently." The table went very quiet. I did not breathe. I stood there holding that wet sponge while 10 people looked at me, and the only thing I could think was that she had used my name. Not Mom, Eloise. Like I was a contractor who had run over her schedule. Kyle came in from the hallway. He must have heard everything. He looked at me. He looked at Rachel. He looked at the table. "Mom," he said, and for one moment, just one, I thought he was going to say something. I thought 4 decades of being my son would add up to something right then. "Rachel just needs a hand, keeping everything together when we entertain. It's really not a big deal." I got down on my knees and I blotted the wine with that sponge. One of Rachel's colleagues, a woman named Christine, caught my eye while I worked. She looked away fast. She didn't say anything. None of them did. But she put her hands in her lap and stared at her plate, and somehow that silent discomfort was harder to absorb than anything Rachel had said. At least Rachel had the nerve to be direct about what she thought of me. When I finished, Kyle said I could go relax in my room. "We're going to keep visiting out here," he said, and I walked down the hallway in the particular silence of someone who has just understood something they cannot ununderstand. I sat on the edge of my bed. I did not cry. I was 67 years old. I had been a schoolteacher for 33 years. I had buried my husband. I had managed parent-teacher conferences and standardized testing seasons and budget cuts that nearly broke our whole department, and I had not cried in front of anyone through any of it. I was not going to cry now. Instead, I waited. At 2:15 in the morning, when the house was completely dark and the Easter dishes were still soaking in the sink, because I had not washed them, not that night, I got up and took my rolling suitcase from the closet. I packed the photographs of Eugene, my medicines, my good winter coat and my pension paperwork, and the small wooden jewelry box that had belonged to my mother, my social security card, my insurance documents, the manila folder of things that mattered. I did not take much else. I left my key on the kitchen counter with a note that said only, "I need some time. Don't worry about me." I drove to the Marriott on Broad Street, checked in, and sat on the hotel bed in my coat until the sun came up. Now I want to tell you something that Kyle and Rachel did not know. Something I had never told them because they had never once thought to ask. Eugene and I had been careful with money for our entire lives. He was a high school principal for 26 years. I was an elementary school teacher for 33. Between us, we had never bought a car we couldn't pay cash for or taken a vacation we couldn't afford. We had a joint account and we each kept separate accounts, and Eugene believed in that the way some men believe in scripture. A person should always have their own financial footing, he would say. Especially you, Eloise. Promise me you'll keep yours. I had kept mine. After Eugene died, his life insurance paid out $400,000. My teacher's pension through the state of Ohio came to about $2,800 a month, every month. I had my own savings from 33 years of working. I was not wealthy. I was not poor. I was not dependent on anyone. I opened my laptop in the hotel room and pulled up my bank account. The balance read $218,000. Then I opened the automatic payments screen. Eugene always said, "Before you cancel anything, count what you're carrying first." I counted. 14 months after I moved to Columbus, Kyle had come to me privately with that particular look men get when they need money and are ashamed about it. He said he had $62,000 in graduate school loans, and the interest was eating them alive. I wrote the check within the week. He said he'd pay me back when things stabilized. That was 2.5 years ago. He had not mentioned it since. About a year after that, Kyle and Rachel found the house. The seller wanted a quick close, and they were short on the down payment. Rachel said it was exactly what they'd been looking for. Kyle came to me with the same expression he'd had about the loans. I gave them $38,000. Rachel called it a gift at the closing. Kyle said it was a loan he'd repay. Neither of them brought it up again. And then there were the monthly transfers. Kyle had set some of them up himself during the months he was between jobs. He never cancelled them when he went back to work. I had never asked him to. Contribution to their mortgage, $1,200 a month, gas, electric, and water. $340 a month. Kyle's truck note. $520 a month. A credit card account I had opened for Rachel's professional expenses, client lunches, work attire, and, I had noticed quietly, several things that had nothing to do with work. $450 a month, on average. $2,510 a month, 46 months. I did the arithmetic by hand, the way Eugene had taught me. The automatic payments alone came to $115,460, plus the loans, plus the down payment. More than $215,000 of the life. Eugene and I had built together, directed into a household where I was not considered a person worth standing up for. I called the bank when they opened at 9. The woman who helped me was patient and professional. I told her I wanted to cancel every automatic payment linked to my account, effective immediately. She read each one back to me and I confirmed them. It took 11 minutes. When she finished, she asked if there was anything else she could help me with. "Yes," I said. "I'd like to transfer the majority of my balance into a new account, and I'd like a restriction placed on any third-party inquiries. She said she'd take care of it. I hung up the phone. Then I ordered room service for the first time in probably 15 years, eggs Benedict and a full pot of coffee, and I ate every single bite. Kyle called at 11:14 that morning. I let it ring. He texted, "Mum, where are you? Rachel is worried." He called again at 2. This time I picked up. "Mom, thank God. What is happening? Where are you?" "I'm somewhere safe." That's not an answer. You can't disappear like this. "Kyle, I want to ask you something. When you think about yesterday, what do you remember?" A pause. "Mom, Rachel already told me she went too far. She's going to apologize." "That's not what I asked. What do you remember from yesterday?" "I remember things got a little tense." I sat with that word for a moment. Tense. "Your wife handed me the kitchen sponge in front of 10 people and told me I had been living in your house for free. You told me to go to my room. That's what you're calling tense." "Mom, you're exaggerating the..." "Kyle, who do you think has been paying your mortgage?" Silence. "The automatic transfer from my account. $1,200 a month to your mortgage servicer. Who did you think was sending that?" I thought Dad had set something up before." "Your father died 4 years ago. I set it up. I have been setting everything up." I read him the full list, the truck note, the utilities, the credit card, the down payment, the student loans. I gave him the number I had calculated that morning. He was quiet long enough that I thought the call had disconnected. "Mom, I honestly did not know." "I know you didn't. You didn't know because you never asked. In 4 years, not once did you say, 'Mom, are you all right financially? Do you have enough for yourself?' You assumed I was the burden and you were doing me the favor. It was the other way around." I heard him exhale. "I'm going to tell you something else. I have $218,000 remaining in my account. Money your father and I saved across 40 years of working. I spent my marriage being very careful with that money. I intend to spend the rest of my life being very intentional with it. Mom, please, come home and we can sit down and work through this together." That house is not my home, Kyle. It never really was. I turned my phone off and took the longest nap I had taken in 4 years. That evening, I called Maud. She and I had been friends since we were 23 and student teaching together in a hot, underfunded school outside Akron. She was the maid of honor at my wedding. She had moved to Savannah 2 years before Eugene died, after her own husband passed. She knew me before I was anyone's wife or mother or anybody's invisible housekeeper. "Eloise," she said when she picked up, "it is 9 o'clock on Easter Sunday. Either something is very wrong or something is very right." "Probably both," I said. I told her everything. Maud listened the way she always had, without rushing to fix it, without interrupting to tell me what she would have done differently. When I finished, there was a short pause, and then she said, "Get on a plane." "Maud, I mean it. I have a perfectly good second bedroom and a screened porch that gets the best afternoon light, and I have been trying to get you down here for 2 solid years. You don't have to decide anything permanent. Just come." I booked a flight for Wednesday morning. Over the 2 days before I left, Kyle came to the hotel once, and Rachel came separately with an apology that was mostly about explaining the circumstances. She'd been under enormous pressure at work. She'd had some wine. She hadn't meant it the way it came out. I listened. I told her I heard her. I did not say I forgave her, because I wasn't sure forgiveness was the right word for what I was feeling. What I felt was more like clarity, like a window that had been fogged over for years had finally been wiped. Kyle came back on Tuesday evening. He had dark circles and wrinkled clothes, and the posture of a man who had recently understood something he didn't want to understand. He sat across from me in the hotel lobby and asked me to name my price. "What would it take," he said, "for things to go back to the way they were?" I looked at my son, the boy I had driven to swim practice at 5:30 in the morning. For 6 years, the boy I had sat up with when he had pneumonia at 14, the boy I had written a check for without hesitation, and I felt something settle into place. "There is no price," I said. "The way things were is exactly what got us here." He cried a little. I handed him a tissue from my purse, because I am still his mother, but I did not change my answer. Savannah in May is something I cannot fully describe. The light is different there, slower somehow, filtered through Spanish moss and live oaks until it lands on everything golden and unhurried. Maud's house is on a street with old brick sidewalks, and her screened porch looks out over a garden she has been building for 3 years. My first morning there, she made coffee, and we sat on that porch and did not speak for nearly an hour, just sat. And I realized I could not remember the last time I had been somewhere with nothing waiting to be done. I slept until 7:30 every morning. I bought fresh shrimp from a vendor at the city market and cooked dinner whenever the mood struck me, which was most evenings, because I actually do love to cook. I had simply forgotten that cooking can be a pleasure when no one is requiring it of you. I signed up for a watercolour class at the Community Arts Centre, taught by Maud's neighbour Delia, who had the gift of making complete beginners feel like they were making something rather than just making a mess. I had not created anything purely for myself since I retired. My phone kept ringing. Kyle, mostly. Some messages were frustrated. The mortgage payment had bounced. A utilities shut-off notice had arrived. He didn't understand how I could do this. Some messages were sad. One voicemail, about 3 weeks in, was mostly just him breathing and then saying quietly, "Mom, I miss you." I listened to that one twice, but I did not go back. 6 weeks after I arrived in Savannah, Kyle appeared at Maud's front door on a Saturday afternoon. He had driven 8 hours from Columbus. He looked hollowed out, 15 pounds lighter, jacket that no longer fit him right. The expression of a man who had recently looked at his life from the outside and not cared for the view. Rachel was not with him. They were figuring things out, he said. She had gone to stay with her sister. Maud excused herself to the garden. She has always known when to disappear. Kyle sat across from me on the porch and told me he had sold his truck. He had taken on consulting work on nights and weekends, and Rachel had admitted, finally, that she had known the automatic transfers were coming from my account. She had known for at least 2 years. She had not told Kyle. I believed him that this was news to him. I also understood that it didn't change very much about what had happened. "Mom," he said, "I need you to know that I'm sorry. Not because of the money. Because of how we treated you. Because you had to disappear at 2 in the morning just to make us notice you were a person." I looked at him for a long time. "Do you mean that?" "Yes." "Then hold on to that. That's the right thing to be sorry for." He asked if there was any chance I would return to Columbus. I told him no. He asked whether I might help them financially at some point in the future. I told him I would think about that after he had spent some real time standing on his own. I gave him $2,000 in cash for the drive home, and for the gas, and because I am still his mother no matter what, and because Eugene would have wanted me to make sure he got back safely. He held on to me at the front door longer than he had since he was maybe 12 years old. After his car turned off the street, Maud came back to the porch with 2 glasses of sweet tea, and we sat there until the light went golden across the garden. After a while she asked, How do you feel? Like myself, I said. For the first time in a long time, exactly like myself. I am still in Savannah. Last month I enrolled in a photography class and bought a real camera, not the cheapest and not the most expensive, simply the right one for what I wanted to learn. That felt like something, choosing the right thing for myself rather than the most sensible thing for a household that wasn't even mine. Maud and I drive out to Tybee Island on Sunday mornings when the weather cooperates, and I photograph the water and the pelicans and the light across the marsh grass. Some of the pictures are bad. Some of them are not bad at all. Either way, they are mine, taken because I wanted to take them, and that turns out to be more than enough. Eugene used to say that freedom isn't what you have, it's what you do with what you have. I thought I understood that when he said it. I understand it considerably better now. I spent 4 years being invisible in a house I was secretly holding up. I am done holding up anything that doesn't hold me in return. And I am not done yet, not by a long shot.